possessed. Rassie also took it one step further this week.
And so much to talk about. It's not this rugby you just heard. Welcome back.
Well, it is done. Can't believe it. The Rugby Championship is over. Springboks make it back-to-back championships for them for the first time. And then, of course, the All Blacks won. They gave themselves a shout with a bonus point win over Australia. And I suppose the big talking point would be how close Argentina came to making a real fist out of it at Twickenham or Twickenfontein. So, yeah, we'll be talking about that and maybe, hopefully, with some time to reflect on what we saw in the URC as well. It's very difficult to try and figure out exactly what is going to happen in terms of form. I think after just one round, or now two in the URC, but some interesting results, I thought. But already you could see that week one was so different in terms of how the teams went about their business to week two. So we'll touch on all of that. And if you want to jump in on board, have a comment, ask a question, please do drop us a like as well on this video if you're watching, and do share it with your friends. We'd love to have more people join this community. It's been absolutely fun having these conversations. But Sim, 2-point win for the Springboks is what our spotlight is going to be on. And to my mind, the Boks weren't as bad as the scoreline suggests. I thought that they actually had a comprehensive victory, but Argentina, I think, took the gloss off it with that late try. It was a beautiful try as well, after the hooter. Really, really, really nice way for them to round things off. But I actually thought, for the most part, Boks were in control, though you could argue in the first half, they trailed, going into the break.
Look, it was great to see 2 points for a change instead of the regulation one. Or maybe there would have been, some level of poetic justice if we'd won by 1 point, just for old time's sakes. Obviously, with this Bok team being partial to 1 point victories. I have to agree with you. I also don't think the performance was as bad. I think sometimes one of the things we need to accept is that you're not playing against yourself. If you beat a team as improved, I think that in terms of world rugby right now, I think the Pumas are probably the second most improved team in the world after the Wallabies. Obviously, the Wallabies last year, we went there and we beat them, twice in their own backyard, which had never happened before since readmission. Yeah. And, they finished bottom of the Rugby Championship table. And they legit had a chance to win this thing sort of going into the fifth round, and you could argue the sixth as well. But the Pumas, they started this movement last year, and what they've done is they've backed it up. We talk about going back to back. They haven't, they haven't had a great year. You've seen the Pumas before. They made the semi-finals in 2007 at the World Cup, and then kind of like nothing for a few years, and then it took them so long to sort of like be thereabouts in terms of the knockout phases. And so I just think, they've kicked on from where they were as a team. And what happened was after we'd beaten them 67-30, there was always going to be a reaction. And you could almost see it with the team they picked as well. In quite an interesting way, when you look at that team they picked, I kind of obviously had to go through it for our preview at work, and you could see, they've got a 6-2 split, which basically means they want their forwards to be involved in battles a lot longer than they had been. And then as you look at the changes they made, moving Santiago Carreras to fullback, and then Cruz Maya to left wing, and then getting Delgui, who's good under the high ball. So it was kind of like, okay, we lost the high ball battle last weekend in Durban, and so let's try and fix that and address it. And then at 9 and 10, obviously they were forced into those changes with the injury to Garcia, and then obviously having decided, and the injury to Albornoz. And so what happened was they then decided this Geronimo Priscantelli, obviously he'd only played 7 minutes or whatever it was of test rugby before. And they were kind of like, but they spoke incredibly highly of him. So he was at Zebre, I think. He was at Zebre. and then has since moved to the top 14. I'm just not sure. I think it might be Rassie where he's moved to. And, he's one of those guys, maybe their version of Sasha, maybe not quite as sort of blockbuster in terms of the expectations. I don't think anyone's ever called him the next Dan Carter in Argentina. But, they kind of found themselves pushed into it a bit like we were pushed into playing that backline in Wellington by the circumstances. And so, you look at that, they kind of like, in the first half was entirely about addressing Durban. And you sat there and, and the Boks weren't quite getting off because also the Boks also wouldn't have been sort of human if the last 2 weekends of they play, like putting the All Blacks away 43-10 and beating the Pumas 67-30, didn't still linger in their heads. They're probably sitting there thinking, oh, you know what, we could, what, all we got to do is just pass the ball and things will happen. And when things were not happening because these guys are defending better than they were last weekend, guys got a bit frustrated. And so, I agree with you. We probably didn't play as terribly as a lot of people think, because I think a lot of people think we played terribly because they expected us to run away with, with the game. And then, what I really liked from the game was, the one avenue, i.e. the sort of globe-trotting avenue to the try line was blocked. And then we just went sort of like old school, tucked it under the jumper. The scrum came into play big time.
Malcolm Marx was always going to get into
There's nothing better than a team that has different ways of winning. That's what I enjoyed the most about that victory.
I think it's very easy to try to write off Argentina and think that, okay, you've got two teams that might be mismatched in terms of ability or depth or what have you. But the Argies, I thought, have had a really good season so far. And let's not forget how they went against the British and Irish Lions as well. They had people talking. So this is not a bad Argentine side at all. This picture looks better than the one last week, which made us look very, very scary. So I'll allow it, Paul.
We were really constipated.
It looked like we were battling through some stuff. Maybe more apt for yesterday's results, just in terms of the scoreboard. But before I ask the question, what is it the Boks did wrong? I think I should ask, because you actually touched on two of the things that I would have said Argentina did right. And for me, really did turn things around with that aerial battle. They were so competitive. It looked like every time the ball went in the air, it was an Argentine player who was going to win it. And they were really, that helped them a lot. Two, and I want to be very careful to not say I'm blaming the referee in any way, but you see how different refs blow the breakdown. And I think with them going really helter-skelter at the breakdown, they won a lot of turnovers from the Springboks. So that's another thing that I thought Argentina did well. They flooded that breakdown. They really were trying to go for slowing down the ball, turning over the ball. And I thought those two things certainly set apart from what they did last week. And I only mention the ref in that you can be successful at that, at sort of negating the Springboks' strength if the referee allows that sort of play. So it's, I think, becoming very important for teams to know what refs will and what refs won't allow based on the opposition you're going to play.
Yeah, look, I think when it comes to refereeing, the one obvious thing that's always been out there is, I think Northern Hemisphere referees, they allow a lot more to take place at the breakdown. They allow it to be more of a contest, which I think, is actually the right way to do it, because I think so many games are won at the breakdown. So let me put it this way. If you don't have a strong set piece as a team, where else can you still kind of like ground yourself in terms of that's where I'm going to get possession, or that's where I'm going to protect myself from getting massacred? And that's usually the rucks, either by slowing it down so that they don't get quick ball to run it through their hands and through you, or basically stealing the ball and sort of getting possession there. So I don't mind that refs make it competitive. And also I thought Andrea Piardi made it particularly, allowed it to be competitive, and it was very competitive. If you remember, Malcolm Marx was back to his sort of armed robbery ways at the breakdown. He wasn't stealing ball. It's almost like he'd come onto the field, with a sidearm, and he was basically saying to us, "Listen, give me this ball or else." And when he came off, Kwacha came in and continued doing, the Lord's work, as it were, just making sure that, hey, listen, boys, your ball is my ball and my ball is my ball, that kind of. So I don't know. I actually genuinely didn't mind. And also, when it comes to yesterday's ref, the only abiding memory for me from the game was him allowing Kane and Moody to get away with it by not giving
Because,
a yellow. I
yeah,
reckon any other ref decides, you know what, that's a deliberate knock on. You can see that he's not trying to slap it down deliberately. But like it's that thing doesn't always, deliberate knock-ons don't always get refereed on intent. They just
yeah.
get refereed on outcomes, and the outcome was he did knock the ball down, and whether he intended to or not. And so like and also given how much Piardi took, how much punishment Piardi took in last week after but from the Aussies after that game at Eden Park, I thought he put in a very strong performance, because the Archie boys were in his ear the whole time, to the point where I think at one stage he actually looked at Pablo Matera and said, and kind of like almost showed him the whistle and said, China, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this yourself, or should I just carry on? And also, I like the ref who actually gives us scrum penalties, because geez, of late we have struggled with those. Referees have kind of like been a little gun shy to go with the whistle. I remember that very first scrum against Argentina, was it last week, with Angus Gardner, and he just ordered the scrum off to use it, and I'm thinking, wow, any other day that's a penalty.
Yeah,
and
give the penalty.
that sets the tone in the match, and to deny that is kind of like, so. No, I funnily enough, I didn't have a problem with how he refereed the breakdown. He allowed it to be a contest. I think that's one of the great places where, like, that's one of the great litmus tests to see if you switched on as a team. If you're not contesting vigorously at the ruck, then something is slightly off with you, because sometimes the line out is kind of like the scrum, you're just stronger, or you bigger, you stronger, you're more technical, or the line out is you're just more efficient than the other team. The ruck is as much sort of smarts as it is actually hard. It's almost like defense in a way, where like if your defense is off, that means you guys are off emotionally. You're not quite sort of switched on to the moment. And so I don't mind if that lets that lets the boys go a bit.
Yeah, that's the one other thing that I didn't mention. I thought that they managed at Argentina to rectify some of the woes that they experienced in the lineout as well. So I look at this match and I think, more than sure, Boks, you've gone off the boil. I think well done, Argentina. I think they played a really good game. I think the changes actually worked for them. I wasn't sure about that move or the switch between 10 and fullback, but I thought paid really good dividends. And they showed with that last try, which obviously counted for nothing, what they can do. And it's almost like they didn't really need to do a lot of grunt work to find those gaps and those opportunities. And that's what Argentina does. We always talk about you've got to earn the right to go wide, but my gosh, those guys can spot a gap. They're really, really good at it. I think despite the disappointment, and I don't want people to go away from this Rugby Championship thinking, cheapers, now Argentina were disappointing. I really thought they were good. And when we started off, in fact, going into this last round, or the second last round, it was still anybody's championship. But I think they'll go home thinking, job well done. It's a pity about the score, but they're definitely putting something together. And I think come 2027, they will be gunning for a quarterfinal place or beyond.
I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be surprised if they went as far as semis. The thing about Argentina, this this current Argentina side is Felipe Contepomi is an incredibly smart operator. Isn't he? Is it him that's a doctor?
Is it?
Yeah, I think he's actually a medical doctor. One of the
Yeah.
old Argentina players. One of the old Argentina players
One of the
was
fly halves in particular.
yes, was a medical doctor. I think it may well be him. So he's an incredibly smart guy, and he's a bit of an attack coach. And they've got a guy from New Zealand as their attack coach, a guy called Kendrick Lynn. Um, here's the irony, if you really like irony.
Yeah.
He comes from exactly the same neighborhood as Tony Brown.
What?
Yeah. We
What?
spoke to him last year in Nelspruit when he was here. So they've got a guy called Kendrick Lynn. He's their attack coach. Said essentially they've got two attack coaches, which is insane. And what Argentina are doing is, like teams are doing things so differently. You've got the French. The French like to send you. That the French like to send you like they develop their decks to like ridiculous levels. They'll send a third string side to play New Zealand. And you sit there and you think, how stupid is this? You're going to lose 3 games, which they did. But those were very close games. And those guys, what they've learned, they third string guys have learned playing against first string New Zealanders is invaluable. So I think, we kind of like at that point where like teams are going about how to skin this rugby cat in so many different ways. So if you look at Argentina's thing is they fill up their backs and some of their forwards, their loosies with sevens boys. Like if it's amazing when you read up on guys in the Argentina side, it's amazing how often you see like, played sevens, played like 6 tournaments of sevens, 7 events, 10 events, whatever. Most of those guys, most of their grounding is there, which basically means in sevens, you learn so much. You learn to work your own breakdown. You learn to pass either side because you have to. You learn to cover vast distances in defense, and you learn to do one-on-one defending by yourself. So there's so much that you learn that you probably wouldn't quite learn in 15-man rugby because, well, there's always somebody else to kind of do it for you. And so what they're doing is that's how they're trying to get there. And then they've got these 2 attack coaches. That's why, like it probably in the first 3 rounds of this competition, they'll probably considered the best attacking team of the competition until obviously, they bumped into our defense and, us in rampant mood. So I think there's so much that's happening there that is to be admired and to be looked at. These guys are properly dangerous. It's not one of those things. It's not one of those situations where you're sitting and you're thinking, it's just a flash in the pan. They've been good. They were good in 2024, but they're going to go in a dip. If they go in a dip, it's just a normal dip. It's not because the project is going on a dip, like a permanent dip. It's these guys are proper. I mean, just to emphasize the sevens thing, did you see how Juan Martin Gonzalez, who's a flank, a blindside flank in 15-man rugby, especially at Saracen. When he had that intercept, did you see how rapidly he was going? The whistle went. Yeah. I'm telling you,
he was going.
One guy catching him, and that's the influence that that sevens has brought into these guys' rugby.
Yeah, I love this Argentina conversation because also they are starting a new championship in Argentina. I think it was announced, was it about a month ago, a couple of weeks ago? It might be worthwhile talking to Frankie Deges, the Argentine journo, because it looks like they are making plans to basically go pro in Argentina. That would, I think, change things quite considerably for them, that they could retain some of their best talent, that they don't all have to go and play in Europe or Japan or elsewhere. And I think, Argentina are onto something. And there's also this thing that I always find that, there were some rugby powerhouses of the past that when things turned professional, got left behind. Argentina or South America generally were a rugby powerhouse, and we tend to forget. And I was reminded this when we spoke to Mark Andrews, that South Africa in that 95 World Cup played one team that I think a lot of people forget was a real center of rugby in Europe, and that was Romania. And people don't even think of Romania as being a rugby country. But there are a lot of countries that I think got left behind. So, I look at Argentina and I think they literally just clawing their way back to pretty much where they belong. Couple of comments, and thanks very much, guys, for sending them. Do drop a comment or a question. Tell us what you thought of that match and your, expectations versus what we saw. And my big question for the morning was, what is it the Argentines did right, and what was it the Springboks did wrong? All right, in fact, it doesn't have to be all negative. Campo, Andre saying you guys called it squeaky bum time indeed. Mission accomplished. They are a good side, the Argies. I absolutely agree, Dre. That's because Paul gave us that incredible thumbnail that made us look like things were going a lot worse physically than otherwise. Campos 675.
The chicken licking hot wings the morning after.
Yeah, they didn't work out. How's it, Jen? Seemed more one-off runners, less dummy runners and shape from the box, says Campo yesterday. Is it a question? Is it because of the players or different game plan? Well, yeah, they didn't have the freedom of the park. I think that's the whole thing. They didn't have the ability to play as loosely as they might have wanted. The Argentine forwards, I thought, really gave a good account of themselves, and the backs, when they got the opportunities, put them away.
Yeah, look, I think this actually brings us more to a bigger question than we probably are ready to admit. The thing about playing Sasha as your 10 and Damien as your 15, and the 15 in today's rugby is essentially your secondary playmaker. The thing about playing those boys is that you probably have to expect that they are going to go a little bit off script. So I think that's why it's so often we kind of lost our attacking shape, because the real problem with those two is, A, they're so confident, B, they're so aggressive and want to have a go, and C, they've got the physicality, athleticism, and skill to be able to make it stick. So when a guy like Sasha decides to go it alone, if you're on the sidelines, you just want to, or even if you're on the field with him, you want to have a go and be like, listen, man, don't start doing your own thing. But when he's going through them like that, where do how does your argument sort of stack up? And it's the same thing with Damien. So in a strange way, you almost can't have those two playing together in that sense. Maybe, funnily enough, maybe playing next to each other is probably a better solution for you. And then you get somebody more to calm things down a bit more from behind. But that's the development going forward of someone like Sasha in particular, as someone who runs the game. When you've got Miney there, with Miney that Miney's just gonna distribute all day long, and it's gonna be sweet. Everyone, Miney's passing is insane. I'm pretty sure the guy he passes to, when he passes, that guy can practically see his name on the ball. Like, oh, no, this is for me. And the other guy who it's not meant for in the line is like, oh, sorry, that's so-and-so's ball, and leaves it alone. That's how accurate he is. A guy like Sasha's going to have to learn to be discerning. That's the age-old question of rugby, particularly at 10. When to kick, when to run, when to pass. And I think a lot of yesterday's disjointedness emanated from kind of like having guys who are more willing to have a go than actually just
keep going through the chains until something came up. And so I think it probably came from that, and that's just a time thing. It's that guys are gonna wait it out, and it's gonna happen. But also, there's no point getting guys that aggressive in intent and not backing them when they're doing exactly what you kind of like asked them by selecting him.
You went there. Criticism of of Damien and Sasha. You heard it here first, folks. He went there. No, I'm joking.
You didn't even think they had bad games. It's just that I think they probably weren't as accurate within the game plan. There's a weird sort of talk about 80-20 in the Springboks. When it comes to Sasha, I'm not sure. It's 80 just in terms of how they play. Sort of 80% what the Boks want and 20%, how Sasha wants to play. And apparently that's what he's kind of like trying to juggle. And the problem is when you've had a weekend like Durban, where he basically, whatever he touched went. Like Argentina must be so happy to see the back of that guy, because I wonder how many line breaks he had against them in the two games. It must be almost 20, and that's one player. So it's difficult to kind of like look around and say to the guy, "Oh, you basically had them on the rack with your running, but don't run." You can't do that.
No, but I just because it's
if he passes properly with Cheslin, if after that break, we're talking slightly differently about his performance, and that was a small thing. That was a small calibration thing, and so I'm just trying to emphasize that it's not.
But I think you make a very, very valid point. And I was in a conversation with somebody who we had Elton Yankees on right at the beginning of the podcast, and he's one of those divisive characters. And I had a conversation with someone saying, "Oh, they didn't really like him, and he wasn't that good a player." And then I asked the question, "Why is it that every Springbok coach since his Currie Cup win with the Lions saw in him something that was worth selecting?" And I would always argue that when it comes to a player like Alton Yankees, he's got that thing that commentators narrow down to game management. He's got that thing of knowing when to have a run, when to have a pass, when to have a kick. And also, at some stages in the game when things aren't working out, deciding where on the park we're going to play things out. And that is something that I think that a Sasha Feinberg Ngomezulu still needs to perfect, to work on, and understand that even if there's an obvious gap in front of you, the game might dictate that the team needs to be, sort of 50 meters downfield or whatever the case may be. So I think you make a very, very valid point, and it's something that those two combined probably do have the coaches scratching their heads around a bit. And it's so ironic that we look at Amani Libbok as being the calmer, more measured, almost if we need to revert to type player. And that speaks volumes of what the Springboks are about in their attack. So, I joke around. It's, I think, a very valid criticism because we do want to see that ultimate game. And the ultimate game, 80 minutes that we're all waiting for, which I think Rassie alluded to again in the lead up to this match, means that you have to manage the opposition. You have to manage the entire game. So, I take that point, and I think it's a very, very good one. There are a couple more comments that have come in. They're running away from me.
Just to finish off on that, years ago, I spoke to Gafidu Toy about playing, about how his career went. This is probably closer to the end of his career, and he was quite honest. There was a one game he played for Griquas where he basically I don't know how many penalties he got. I don't know how many conversions he got. He scored a couple of tries, and he
shot
basically,
the lights out.
And I think he dropped from the 16-meter mark, from the 10-meter from inside his own half. Which is basically literally from the parking lot. He nailed the drop goal and stuff. And he says one of his greatest failings subsequent to that was he genuinely thought he needed to have games like that every weekend. It's just like, no, certain games you're just going to have to pass, you're going to have to play the assist role. Certain games you're just going to have to kick a pole. Certain games you might just have to make your tackles as much. Granted, at fly, if you need to do a bit more. But the point I'm making is you're never going to be, you're never going to play like that. And I think Sasha's so talented that I don't imagine the two carriers will go the same. But I think Sasha's going to have to be one of those guys that has to be mindful that he cannot have a game like that every weekend.
Yeah. No, he's going to have to manage not just the pressure from the public, but the pressure within himself to try and keep a measure of control. It's going to be a massive learning curve, I think, for him. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the two of them meld together for the Stormers in the URC. Elijah saying, hey guys, this is a time to really worry about fatigue, brain fades, and egos in the team. Looking especially at Sasha Cheslin, a few players in the back line. By the way, Twickenfontein was a VAR because he was out there, Elijah. I'm glad you managed to go out to see the guys. I just think that it wasn't a clinical match. I do think that we haven't seen the very, very best of Cheslin Kolbe in this Rugby Championship, but he still produced fireworks and moments of magic because that's what he does. And it's almost like that thing, like the expectation is he can never make a mistake. He can never stuff up. He should never. And when he does, it's almost like, oh my gosh, the world is going to end. Cheslin Kolbe made a mistake. But I don't think there's anything into the egos convo. We touched on it last time round. Maybe fatigue might be a thing, but I would put it down maybe to the fatigue of traveling to London on a Monday and having only a few days to turn things around. And, and maybe the Argentines managed it better because they made more changes as well. So, they had fresher legs out. But yeah, tough to call. I don't think I'm too worried about the brain fades and the egos at the moment. I think the players have their heads on, and I think that Rassie and Tony and the team will make sure that they maintain that going into the end of year tour. Elijah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, Cheslin hasn't been the same Cheslin. You can pick out, you can go to the All Black game in Wellington, where he gets stripped off the ball over the try line by Jordy Barrett, and then you can go to obviously the drop kick that was or wasn't that led to Argentina's first try in Durban, and then you can go to yesterday's very loose pass. It was almost like, remember Wellington when in 2018, that 36-34 game when Villy came through and Jordy Barrett had let that's gone for a quick line out where he passed.
And he passed it straight into
basically it was exactly the same. It reminded me of that. He's made his mistakes, and yes, he definitely is off color. But geez, I'd much rather have a guy who's off color that sparks a comeback with that intercept in Wellington,
right?
Like takes that kick pass from Sasha, at full pelt in Durban. Yes, he's not producing Cheslin like performance, but Cheslin like performances are superhero performances. Again, he might be a winger. He also cannot produce like that every single time he hits the, he hits the pitch. So I think every now and again we need to kind of like give the guys a bit of leeway in terms of maybe just to say they're human. They will have games where they don't write. I mean, they don't do as well as as well as you think they should. It's just one of those seasons for Cheslin.
Yeah, the thing is with a player like Cheslin is he's like Peter Steph Tutoy. If he's fit, he plays. He doesn't get rotated out. He doesn't get Soma rested. He doesn't get, take the week to refresh while we give someone else
he's immune.
Right.
He's immune to rotation.
Yeah.
Which is insane in a Rassie team.
He's that guy. He will always play. And there's a conversation that I would love to have after this international window, because I'm interested in what the future looks like at wing. Because, Ethan Hooker, I thought, again, gave good account of himself. He really looks so comfortable in that position. But you've got guys coming back from injury, and I wonder if this isn't the time to give a guy like a Cheslin, when you can afford to, an opportunity to maybe play off the bench every now and again, or we do have to also be mindful that he's one of those guys who's, what is he, 31?
Yeah, he's early 30s. He's 31 now. It's that's the other thing. You see Cheslin, you always kind of think of him as youthful. He's been around the block, eh?
He's been around
a long time.
Yeah. Elijah, what do you say? So many questions. Oh, there was a question here with fatigue. Is there really a need for a 5-game year-end tour instead of a 4-game? Matt Pierce spoke to Marx, and these guys cannot wait to get a break from this shift. Yeah, that additional match, the one added against Japan, I think Johan Ackermann had something to say about it the other day, sort of indirectly, and look, he's not going to come out outright and criticize SA Rugby, but it was after World Rugby came out with that suggestion that elite players are going to have to be capped their matches at 30 games a season, and Acker said, well, in that case, SA Rugby also needs to then understand, or at least work in conjunction with the franchises to ensure that they don't keep on adding test matches. And he suggested, I think he said something like 11 test matches might be more ideal if there is indeed this cap. So yeah, that additional match does throw a spanner in the works, because a lot of those URC coaches are going to be thinking it's the end of the year. A lot of these guys might even pick up injuries, never mind having to have rest protocols, but they'll be going to those European Cup competitions, for the respective franchises, and they might miss their best players. I do think we need to think critically about how much rugby these guys are playing at the elite level.
Yeah, look, it's chicken and egg stuff. I find it ironic that it's Marx of all people who's kind of like tired, because in Japan that's where they play the least games. So like he should be the one guy who's not tired, because they don't play as many games as they counterparts who campaign in Europe. Therefore, have to go to the URC or the Champions Cup or the Challengers Cup. So there's a surprise, but I think the whole thing is a bit chicken and egg in that obviously you don't add that game unless you're making money from it. Game in Wembley, surely, lots of money is being made from that game. And the way the South African rugby system works is everybody gets their money from South African rugby. And so my thing is, where does South African rugby get its money? It gets its money from the Springboks. And so if you're saying, oh, they need to sort of have less matches and whatnot, that's one less opportunity to make money, which then means a lot less money sort of doing the rounds. Remember, a lot of people only think of rugby in our country as just the 4 URC sides and maybe stretching it to the 8 Currie Cup sides. But actually, it's 14 teams. It's 14 provincial unions. All of them, every single month, get money, a share of revenue from SARU. And for that to happen, the Boks need to play. They are the world champions. Somebody has to try and maximize on that, and this is how it works. I'm not saying it's right, but I am kind of like giving context why it's important for the Boks to play. And look, we also have to be a bit more reasonable here. Rassie rotates so much that there isn't one Bok who's going to play 15 matches if you've got 15 matches. Not the way Rassie rotates. It's not going to happen. So if they're not playing 15 matches for the Boks, then maybe they can play more for their team, to make up for that 30. But also, the teams as well. I remember watching the Bulls under Jake,
every single weekend, Jake would go on about how he doesn't have depth. And you'd go and look at the Bulls' website. The Bulls' website, they had 55 players at the time, but Jake was using just the first 30 religiously over and over and over again. And then and then he was like, well, there's 25 other guys you're not choosing. If there's 25 cats you're not choosing, guess what? It's kind of on you as well. So like everyone has to kind of like find a solution first instead of kind of like saying, oh, well, it's so-and-so's problem.
Well, that balance, I think, is exactly where the fans are going to step in. And I'm looking at that comment that Campo made saying he'd rather like to see the Boks play more and our teams leave the European Champions Cup, at least until we can actually compete. And I understand that because, the Boks are the big draw card. They're very well supported. They'll sell out a stadium anywhere in the country in a heartbeat. We might talk about ticket prices and that chicken and egg versus money situation. But obviously, I think that if you want to keep promoting the game or want to keep people really interested, the more the Springboks play, at least from a South African perspective, there are fans. There are a lot of people who don't watch rugby outside of the national team, which might be an oddity for somebody who's listening in from another country. It is a very weird thing here where the Springboks are the best supported rugby team in the country by people who don't necessarily support rugby. I think we're going to end up having a lot more debate about how you mete out these rugby matches amongst the best players. It looks like the talks of the Rebel League as well have died down at the moment, at least for the time being. I don't know what's happening there, but it also looked like what they were proposing was to be able to infuse their season into the already existing seasons as well. So, sure, it just becomes, like a spaghetti soup, or just an absolute mess of trying to tangle how you best manage these players. Burning Lash saying Rassie needs the extra tests to get caps into the younger players, which also valid point. And maybe that's where you do play a team like a Japan. And obviously you don't want to write off Japan. They've had their golden moment against the Springboks.
No, you also don't want to lose to them again.
So you don't, exactly.
Eddie Jones will never let you forget it, that he's beaten you
twice. Exactly. So you still have to take it seriously. But maybe there is scope in, I want to say, almost tier two teams going on little tours and maybe playing the provincial or the franchise sides and then maybe playing a South Africa A, or maybe that's something that comes back into vogue, with the tours now becoming a thing for the future as well. I'd love to see a dirt tracker team. There was always a fun thing to have these guys play a midweek game and, they're in and around the fringes and, it's the youngsters and the up-and-comers. Maybe tours help us in the long run as well. What other competitions? There really are so many that have come through. Elijah saying that'll be a cracker in Paris. Absolutely. Campo, Colby has done some amazing things for the Boks. But would be nice to see Edel van der Merwe for a couple of games. And Edel back from injury now and looking like he was never injured. So, he's knocking on that door. Hooker is going to be wanting to fight to keep his place in the squad. And like I say, maybe there's an opportunity there to rest somebody like a Cheslin for one test, at the end of the year or whatever the case may be, just to make sure that, he's well able. I think I'm losing track of all of the comment. Oh, there was a conversation happening back and forth. I think that's why I was losing track of the comments. But we got we've been on for 45 minutes, haven't even touched on what happened in Perth. The weather was not great. The All Blacks doing All Blacks things in that weather, but they really are good at playing that game. I think the big thing for them this year is that other teams are also capable of matching them. But they still were in with a shout to win the Rugby Championship after their final game of the tournament. And you'd have to give them credit for a team that looks like, and they don't look like they're former selves. I'm not suggesting that, but to be in it right until the last match is commendable.
Yeah, look, I mean, I just think with the All Blacks are the Brazil of, of international rugby. Therefore, the expectations are not the same as everybody else. Maybe the only other people who have similar expectations of another team as the All Blacks is probably us with the Boks. I just think it's important to understand that the All Blacks are in transition as a team, and over and above that, they don't have players in key positions. Like the All Blacks struggles at 10 are serious, not because Bodie Barrett is not good, but that's all he is. He's just good now. He's no longer the Bodie Barrett of old who could just take over a game and run away with it from 10. They do miss someone like
literally run away and do an 80-meter dash, and no one's going to catch it.
So even if the chat now is they miss Richie Mo'unga, that's all good and well, but Richie's also an older All Black, and so that's again papering over the cracks. So what they need to do is to find almost brand new fly-ups over the next 2 years that will take them, to complement whichever of the older guys they take to the next World Cup. Probably, one or two guys. You actually don't need more than two fly-ups in a squad. And even the second one, the Boks believe that the second one hardly ever plays. So that's why they didn't pick one, if you remember, in their last team that went to the World Cup, until obviously Malcolm Marx's injury forced that they got Pollard back, and geez, how important did it turn out to be?
It was amazing.
Maybe you do need two fly-ups. But the point I'm making is they're kind of like missing great players in important positions. I think they don't have a proper enforcer lock. I like the props the props they have. Like the four guys. When you look at them, that's a good combo. They hookers. I don't think they got bad hookers. I like Cody Taylor. I like Takiaho. And then I like guys that have come through, like the blind side. Is it Simon Parker?
Yes.
He's going to be okay.
Big boy.
Tupuva is not likable to opposition players, but I'm pretty sure teammates love him. So they've got a lot of decent guys there, but in certain positions, I would say blindside lock 10, probably a 12. No. I'm fine with Jordy Barrett at 12, but should he be the only guy? And then maybe at 13.
Or is he not better for them? Is it not better for them at fullback as well, Jordy? Because they do need some solidity.
I like Will Jordan at fullback. I got no issues, and also like he can chop and change as per the game. Move Will Jordan to wing, and the wings. I don't think they have a problem. You got Will Jordan, you got Clark, you've got Narrower. Yesterday they decided to go with Leicester Fainganuku, and they've got players, but they probably suffering a little with just like in crucial positions here and there, and that's going to take time. And also, Razor's in his second season, and with the All Blacks, you can't experiment like we did. I think what we did was we basically like made our game as boring as possible. We just turned. We just went to the scrum, to the maul, defense, and the kicking game, and that was it. That was us. It was done. You can't do that in New Zealand. You've got to play like New Zealand all the time, and I think sometimes that costs you. It costs you games that you could be winning in much more boring ways, and also it probably bores your players to tears as well because they're not used to playing like that. So I don't know. I don't think they're in as much crisis as everyone likes to think.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think that they'll be fine. They are going through a transition period, though, and I think their fans will probably have to just accept that for the next couple of seasons, they really are building up to the 2027 World Cup. We do have that slide that I want to take a look at before we wrap things up, and I think it's just like a bit of a calendar that Paul has slapped together for us, which is great. And yeah, so I think the whole thing is there isn't a global calendar. And I think this is what this highlights for me more than absolutely anything. You know, we started the year and we were still playing URC, of course, and the European Rugby Champs, the Six Nations Varsity Cup, which was great because at least Rassie was able to unearth some talent there as well. There was that Lions tour, but obviously for the Springboks, another test match added, that of against Japan. And then also some sevens, which is always a little bit of fun. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for all of those comments. Sim, looking at this end of year, I'd love to do a bit of a Bok barometer as well. We're going to have some time. But looking at these matches here, France for me is the one that I think we called out right in the beginning of the year as being the key and crucial one. It's almost like we've forgotten how good Ireland are. Unfortunately, Wales haven't turned things around, and Italy can be competitive. We've seen that before. Should we worry about the Irish? Should we worry about the French?
Yeah, we should. Also, in terms of how we're going to try and sort it out, you know, that the players have a choice to go. You know, the players have a choice to take a couple of weeks off from playing in the URC, which obviously started 2 weekends ago. They've got that choice. A lot of them are going to take it on, and then what happens is they come back for like 1 or 2 games just to get into the playing rhythm again, and then obviously they go to the end of year tour. Sasha and Damien Willems have chosen to go on tour with the Stormers, or to stay on, or probably stay on in London, because the Stormers are going this week to play overseas. Guys like that could get injured over the next couple of weeks or whatever, however long the Stormers tour is going to be. And that could put pressure on, on the Bok team. But it's, France kind of like is the rematch that the rest of the world wants to see because of what happened in that World Cup quarterfinal. Wherever they are, they still think they were cheated, and they hate our guts, which is fair enough. It's fine. And also they're kind of like a team. They are our sort of they are our physical and intellectual equals in rugby, because they are the other team that prizes being such big bloody forwards. Like guys are even bigger than ours, which is insane. And then they don't, unlike us, they don't use options when it comes to the split on the bench. They don't go 7-1, 6-2, or 5-3. They go 6-2 every single time.
Yeah,
and then obviously they've got this, Fabien Galtier has always been an incredibly smart rugby person, and so he hasn't suddenly become stupid by being their coach. So they're kind of like our intellectual and physical equals. And when those two teams meet, it's just insane in terms of the margins that decides who wins. We'd like to get one over them again, just to, to put the knife in about 2023. And I think the Bok coaches will desperately want to beat Ireland, because I think, here's one of the weird things. Rassie has been around with the Boks.
Yeah.
I think he's only played Ireland twice. As head coach, he's only played the Ireland twice, which was last year when they came here. Because when we toured there, poor Jacques Nienaber was the guy taking the L's. When we toured there at the World Cup, Jacques was the guy taking the L's. But Rassie's score against Ireland is 1-1, because he won at Loftus and they won at Kings Park. I think the Boks are quite keen to set some kind of record straight there, with Ireland. But Ireland have had those massive sort of retirements of all those older players they've had. So it'll be interesting to see if the new Leinster boys, because it tends to only ever be Leinster with Ireland, are up to sort of just filling those boots, especially with sort of the junior Leinster side having lost twice in the URC already in South Africa.
Yeah. Well, which brings me to URC, and I thought I was going to wrap up, but a very, very, very brief look, because yeah, time is flying, But yeah, I was at that match at Loftus last night to watch the Bulls against Leinster. And it was a very, very close game. You know, the Bulls will, I think, be relieved more than anything. I don't know if you managed to catch any of the URC matches. They didn't have a good ran at all in that first round match against the Stormers, where they weren't able to put even 3 points on the board.
They were 35-0.
35-0, and then at least against the Bulls, a lot better in terms of performance, and they looked like a team in that first week that had been rusty and needed to get some rugby under the belt, and this week they looked like they'd been together for a little bit longer and were stringing things together. But is there a little bit of a concern with the strength of Leinster? I say this, open the show by saying it's too early to tell.
They'll be there when it counts. I think one of the big things is I don't think they've got their British and Irish Lions back yet. And once those guys come back, and we underestimate the value of these difficult trips for the younger players, but that's where you build. That's where you properly build your younger players. You know, one of the things that people ignore or don't pick up when, you know, we complain about Rassie sort of rotating as much as he does. The philosophy within the Bok guys is, if you are going to expose a guy to opportunities, or if you are going to give a guy opportunities, they have to be difficult opportunities. They have to be, you know, so they don't in a 3-test series, they don't give you an opportunity in the 3rd test. When they're, you know, when the rubber is won, you know, they don't give it to you with, you know, with the, you know, it's just the dead rubber. They make sure that you play in a live game where the pressure will be a lot more real, because if you're playing in a dead rubber, and it's just like, we don't have to, even if we lose, it's fine. So I think that's what Leinster are doing. I mean, sending guys down here, they consider them, the New Zealanders, the Aussies, they consider coming down here the ultimate challenge, you know, because it's the physicality, it's the heat, it's the altitude, it's, you know, it's a whole, you know, just people that love rugby hate you. You know, all those things put together, they develop you as a player. You know, it's not just, you know, the technical stuff, you know, you know, the skills or whatever. It's also what's between the ears. Are you tough enough to come through a place like this unscathed? You know, what do you react like? And so I think that's all they've done. I'm pretty sure they'll be thereabouts when the time comes. I don't think they're going to have issues.
We're going to leave it there. That reminds me of, that's a very Heineke Meyer thing, and a point to leave it on. So that's you're
going to do the diamonds thing. Are you going to do the coals and diamonds thing?
Do you remember the coal? What was the coals and diamonds thing?
Yeah, if you put enough pressure on coal, it turns into diamonds.
Yeah, there was that. And then the other.
My science is a bit faulty, because, you know, I do write about drop kicks for a living, which means I'm not particularly smart to start with. I've always questioned that. Like, is it true? It's like, if that was the case, I'm going to Mpumalanga and, you know, sorting myself up.
Getting some coal. Well, there was that one, and then I'm going to leave it with this, because, and we should try and speak to him as well, because he always had things to say. And the other saying he'd always say was, tough times don't last. Tough people do. Remember that one? I don't know if you ever heard them say that one. He loved that one. That was one of his favorites.
So they all had their sayings. I mean, if you're going to get me involved with what Springbok coaches had to say, you know. Listen, I don't want to go down the path of talk is cheap, money buys whiskey, or if you want to run with the big dogs, you must lift your leg, you know.
Talk is cheap, but money buys the whiskey. I think we could do one show remembering some of the highlights of the best Springbok coach quotes in press conferences ever. We've had some pearlers. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for the comments. Keep the conversation going. We'll probably touch a little bit more on URC next week, but also perhaps a really good time to take a look at that Springbok depth chart that we started the season with and look at which players have gone on from what we saw right at the beginning. So almost like a bit of a Bok barometer, almost look at, who looks like they're settled and who maybe is not so much. The world rankings are going to count as well at the end of this year for the World Cup draw for 2027. And I know that one of the difficulties is that, you don't get a lot of points. Maybe we need an expert to break down how these things work. You don't get a lot of points for beating a team that's ranked very, very highly. If you are ranked higher than that team. So it seems like still a bit of a two-edged sword for me, but maybe we'll delve into all of that and more. And hey guys, if there is anything that you want us to talk about, drop the suggestions in as well in the comments. I appreciate that. I see there was a bit of a convo going on about the depth at schoolboy rugby level, and maybe that's something that might be worth delving into over the next couple of weeks. Thanks very much, everyone. Cheers, Sim. Always good to see you.
Terrible in those chats. I'm terrible in those kiddie chats because I barely know my own son's name, so I struggle to know other people's kids.
No, we'll bring in like a junior. Hey, Teram Tembu, Babalum Tembu has been coaching at school level. I spoke to him, and he was very keen to have a chat with us. So maybe one of those guys who's been coaching at schools. And also, I had a chat with Kennedy Tsimba. On Thursday. So seeing if we can't organize him, but he's with the Bulls now, so it becomes tougher once these guys start working for a professional union. But we'll reach out and try and get hold of him as well. But thanks very much for the suggestions, and if you have any more, drop them in at the bottom. Really, really love to know what it is you want to talk about. Cheers, everyone.
Hey guys, if you like what you see and you want to support the show, we want you to be part of that Rugby Union Show family. Then just hit the like button, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, make sure you us every time we're on. Slap that bell harder than Rassie finds loopholes in World Rugby's rulebook. There are new episodes every week. Don't miss it. To That's Your Rugby Union Show. Well, what a week it's been.
He's playing like a man.